Hi, welcome back to Pragmatic Agility. In the last lesson, we figured out how to find duplicates. In this lesson, we're going to go into how to make a foreign key. Foreign keys, primary keys, and other kinds of constraints are very important. If you do any kind of database development, please put in your constraints. I've had to work with databases where the developer, who was probably a novice, made a bunch of tables to use in the database, didn't put in the constraints, and things got very confusing later on because this individual also had custom unique constraints that you really didn't expect to come across, and they were there. And when users violated those constraints, what ended up happening was it made a lot of reports incorrect. But we're kind of getting off topic now, so let's go into how to make a foreign key constraint. So if we go into our Crash Bandicoot database, let's refresh that. Let's look at our table 1. We have an ID column. I'm going to add another column here. I'm going to call it table 2 ID. I'm going to make sure that it's the same data type as the ID field on table 2. Now pay attention here. I could name this anything I wanted to. You definitely want to try and create your database, create your tables, create your columns in a way that they describe themselves. Already, by naming this column this, I can look at this as somebody who's coming in fresh and say, okay, I'm going to table 2 and I'm going to the ID field. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to table 1. I'm going to click Save, Persist. So I have that in there. We're not done yet. I'm going to go into table 2. Actually, I don't need to go into table 2. I'm going to go into my foreign keys. I'm going to right click. I'm going to select Create New Foreign Key. And I'm going to select table 2 as my reference key. Oh wait, we have to put primary keys on the tables. Let's do this. We'll say that this is we got to add constraints to do this properly. Okay, let's do this. I knew this was going to end up being a little bit longer. So constraints, right click. I'm on table 1, right clicking, create new constraint. Table 1 PK primary key, that's what I need. I'm going to select the ID field and hit OK. I'm going to save that. I'm going to persist it. Normally on a database table, it's an integer or a number that's the primary key, or what's called a GUID, but we're not doing that. You can make any type of column a primary key. Primary keys have to be unique. So I can't add 2 strings of text to be that same primary key. So I'm going to go ahead and select my table 2. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to right click, create a new constraint. Table 2 underscore PK. The dbeaver is being kind and giving me a name. That's fine. Type is primary key. That's correct. OK. Save. Now notice this. If you really want to, you can open up a SQL script pane, run this command yourself, or you can log into a terminal and run the command again. If you want the command, it's right there. I don't memorize the commands. I work in MySQL, Microsoft SQL, DB2 sometimes. I've done some stuff in Firestore with that Google database. I rarely, if I had to add a complicated constraint, I would be looking up the command myself. So dbeaver is handling this, saving it. I'm going to go back to table 1 now. Go back to my constraints tab, which was already open from the last time. I'm going to right click. Actually, we need to go into foreign keys. Foreign keys is a type of constraint though. So create new foreign key. I'm going to select my reference table as table 2. So on table 1, we have an ID, but no, we're going to say table 2 ID on table 1 references the ID on table 2. And on delete, we could cascade, which means that these tables start to enforce something called Referential Integrity, which means that if I add a table 2 ID in table 1, that ID has to exist as a value in table 2. If it doesn't, the database will block it and say you can't do that, which is perfectly fine, because you'll find in some instances you'll have users or other programmers who have misunderstood the design of the database, who are essentially adding data that does not make sense in the context of the application. And these foreign key constraints allow you to enforce referential integrity, so that you can say, well, if this exists, if you're saying that this is related to this object over there, that object exists and the database is guaranteeing that. So on delete cascade means that if I delete this from table 1, the reference on table 2 will also be deleted. Set null says if I delete it and set it to null, then the reference to it on this table will be set to null. Okay, so it's getting a little complicated. Right now, I'm just going to say the easiest one to understand usually is cascade. So we're going to say on update, on delete, cascade. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to save. So again, here we go. We have the command. Alter table, table 1, add constraint, table 1, FK. dbeaver has gone ahead and named it for me, which is fine. Foreign key, table 2 ID, references, crash bandicoot, table 2 ID, on delete, cascade, on update, cascade. So that means if this value reference changes, change it on the reference table as well to the same thing. Enforce that referential integrity. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click persist. All right, so that ran. Now, if we go into dbeaver and when I click on table 1 and I go to the ER diagram, we can see the related tables. And if I click this, it shows me which fields are related to each other. Table 2 ID goes to IT on table 1. Table 2 ID on table 1 goes to table 2 ID. The names make sense. This diagram makes sense to me. We have created a foreign key constraint, and it's all good. So let's see if Classic Models has foreign key constraints. Yep, they sure do. So you can see how useful they are. We can see how things are related. So I'm in the Classic Models database, so we can see customer number is related to customer number. That's good. That makes sense to me. Same relation. Sales rep employee number. What is this? This is self-reference. Reports to has to be an employee number. Okay. So we've created a foreign key constraint. We've kind of explained what they do. They enforce referential data integrity, which means you're setting up rules between your tables. You're saying if data over here is referencing data in another table, that data has to exist. We're not going to let somebody or something insert data that doesn't make sense. For example, let's say that in sales rep employee number, I'm a programmer, I've made a mistake, I've sent a -1 for this value. I've said I'm putting -1 as the employee number. And then in the database, employee number -1 does not exist in the employees table. Now let's say I allow that to occur because I didn't put in constraints. What does that mean in the future when another programmer is looking at that column and sees a -1? And if he happens to realize that employees doesn't have a -1, does that mean that employee doesn't exist? Is he supposed to leave that in there? Is he supposed to take it out? There's a there's a lot of questions that come up with that when you start to have all this bad data in your database. Foreign keys help you avoid that. In this lesson, we looked at creating a foreign key, and it kind of took up the whole lesson slot. So in the next lesson, we will handle how to make a view. I'm going to go ahead and close this lesson so it doesn't get too long. If you found the content useful or beneficial, be sure to give it a like or subscribe. Thanks for your time. See you in the next lesson. Bye.